Good evening, you guys. I'm Spiros Kensos, one of the co-chairs. And a quick reminder before we begin, all current members, make sure you vote for the WGA Board of Directors by September 21st. Now I'd like to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Donald Martin. He's a member of our committee and a multiple award-winning screenwriter and producer, ranging from 1996 when he was nominated for a Writers Guild of Canada Award for Best Original Screenplay for Never Too Late, starring Olympia Dukakis, to Donald's comedy Queen Bees, starring Ellen Burstyn, which was released this June. His film, The Disappearance of Mrs. Wu, had its premiere in August as the opening night film at Gina Davis's Bentonville Film Festival. In television, he's produced over 50 movies and miniseries to his credit. And Donald, welcome, and thank you so much for moderating tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for asking me. And I would just like to point out to everyone here that this portion is being recorded. And so Barry's discussion with myself is going to be recorded for posterity. Once we arrive at the end of it, then we'll signal that the recording will end, and then everyone can ask questions through text or through raising their hand and turning their cameras and microphones on. So thank you. So welcome to Making Love with Barry Sandler. I never thought I'd be saying those words. The Advocate calls him one of the most influential gay artists in the United States. In 2007, the Writers Guild of America named him one of our gay groundbreakers. He's the recipient of the Outfest Gay Pioneer Award for Courage and Artistry, and the GLAAD Media Award, and the PFLAG Oscar Wilde Award, just to name a few. He has been honored by festivals from Berlin to Santa Barbara and everywhere in between. His career spans decades. He has a BA and an MFA in film from UCLA, and he now teaches at the University of Central Florida. Here are just some of his credits. Movies we're all familiar with, and movies we all love, I'm sure. Crimes of Passion, starring Kathleen Turner and Anthony Perkins. The Mirror Cracks, starring Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor. The Duchess and the Dirtwater Fox, starring George Segal and Goldie Hawn. Gable and Lombard, starring James Brolin and Joe Claybert. All American Murder, starring Christopher Walken. I love this movie. Kansas City Bombers, starring Raquel Welch. And the reason why we're here, Making Love, starring Harry Hamlin, Michael Onkine, and Kate Jackson, directed by Arthur Hiller for 20th Century Fox, released in 1982, the very first major studio film to present a positive portrayal of gay men. For me, as a young gay man who dreamed of being a screenwriter, this movie had a huge impact on me. It inspired me. I don't think I would be a screenwriter today, honestly, if it weren't for this movie that gave me permission to think of myself as possibly being a screenwriter. So Barry Sandler is one of my heroes, and it is an honor to speak with him this evening. So welcome, Barry. Thank you. So how does a guy from Buffalo end up writing what is considered one of the most important, groundbreaking mainstream movies to deal with issues of being gay and coming out in Ronald Reagan's America? Did you ever imagine that this person would be you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Donald, for that introduction. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, let me give you some a background on how the film came to be and how I ended up writing it. I had broken through as a screenwriter fairly early on after actually while I was still at UCLA, having written the Kansas City Bomber script that was made into a film. And after that, I did a number of films in the Hollywood studio system that were essentially escapist kinds of films, big star-driven vehicles, comedies, some mysteries, some very non-personal films for me. And I was at a point in my life and in my career, just about turning 30, where I was really kind of reevaluating where I was going as a writer and as a screenwriter. And my partner at the time was Scott Berg, who most of you know is a great and Pulitzer Prize winning biographer who wrote the Charles A. Lindbergh biography, and Sam Goldwyn, and Max Perkins, and Woodrow Wilson. Anyway, Scott knew that I was going through this crossroads, let's say, of where I wanted to go as a writer, and he really kind of planted the seed of writing a coming out story, and doing it very much along the lines of, my own experience, his as well. And I resisted it. I mean, I really felt this was going so personal. I didn't know whether I wanted to really cross that line. And I kind of balked, and I kind of, just refused to really deal with that possibility. And he kept pushing and pushing and pressing, and finally, wore me down. And I said, okay, I think I have to do it. And the one thing I did say though, was that I did not want to spend 6 months or whatever it took to write this the screenplay, to pour my heart and soul and blood and guts into it, and not have anyone buy it, because there had never been a film certainly out of the Hollywood studio system that was so centralized in terms of a positive experience with dealing with gay people, that really dealt with the coming out process, that dealt with a gay man's drive towards self-acceptance, self-respect. These are issues that I really felt the film had to be, but had never been done before. So I didn't know whether any studio at that time in 1981, which was when I wrote it, would go for it. So I said to Scott, if a studio will be willing to develop it, in other words, if we go in and pitch the idea, and they say, yeah, we will develop this idea, then at least I knew that if the script worked, that there was a strong chance of making it. But I needed that assurance that they would be willing to make it, and that would then give me the impetus to actually sit down and write it. Well, Scott was close with Claire Townsend, who was the head of development at 20th Century Fox. The head of production, who was Claire's superior, was Sherry Lansing. And we took it to Fox. Claire jumped at it, brought it to Sherry, and Sherry said, yes, let's develop it. I contend to this day that it took two women to get this film made. Certainly to get it in development, but ultimately to get it made. I don't think at 1981, 82, that any male production executive, straight or gay, would have taken on this project. And as you said earlier, yeah, it was pre-AIDS, but it was still Reagan's America. And we were, coming out of the 70s, which was a very kind of countercultural, liberating time for film and the arts in general. But now the 80s was kind of a reaction against that. It was reactionary in that sense, and in many other senses. But at least the fact that this studio, led by Sherry, with Claire right behind, and would be willing to tackle this, to go against the cultural sensibility of that time.
Now, you had mentioned to me that, and you've just stated that the relationship between the Harry Hamlin character and the Michael Lonking character is somewhat inspired by your own relationship with Scott Berg. Somewhat. So yeah. Can I ask which one of you is Harry Hamlin and which one is Michael Lonking?
As you're a writer, and everybody on the Zoom is a writer, or most of them, and you bring, your own experience, your own sensibility, your own the thoughts and feelings to every character you write. So, you know, there's a lot of me in both those characters. Probably a little more Harry than Michael, but uh, you know, I experienced a lot of what Michael went through, and a lot of what Harry went through. So I think, you know, there was a good deal of me in both those characters.
So it's wonderful that you had a studio developing it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, can I just let me just finish
Yes,
up in terms of
yes, yes.
development. So once Sherry said we want to develop this film, she brought Dan Melnick, who was a very powerful, incredible producer. He'd also been a head of a studio and was head of Columbia and was responsible for films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then as a producer, All That Jazz and Altered States, the Ken Russell film, All That Jazz, the Fosse film. So he came from a background of very important films, let's say. And he had started his own production company called Indie Prod. And they just made a deal at Fox. And he and Sherry had worked together prior to this at, I believe it was MGM, and it could have been Columbia too, but Sherry brought him in through Indie Prod and told him about this project. And he said, yeah, if the script works out, I want to produce it. And between Sherry and Dan, that kind of power duo gave the heft and the importance to getting the film made, providing the script worked out. And, you know, it ultimately did.
It worked out very well. But while you were in that development process, did you get notes from either the executives or from the producer that rubbed you the wrong way, or were they?
Interestingly enough, I didn't. I mean, I would have expected to, because I certainly did on other films. But the first draft that I turned in, the only notes was it ran a bit long, and I knew it needed to be cut down. But I was never told that you had to cut the sex scenes, you had to cut the any of the gay material, you know, any of the more provocative, more daring elements of the script. Melnick was great. Well, you know, he certainly was a very socially conscious man, and he knew what this film was and what it could be, and that it was groundbreaking in that sense, presenting a very positive view of gay men. And he didn't want to whitewash it anyway. He wanted to make the film that we set out to make. And he was in many ways protective of the material, because there were other elements at the studio in distribution who had problems with the material, who had problems with the whole concept of the film, and wanted to, well, didn't want to make it in the first place, but then once it was made, wanted certain cuts, changes, but Melnick and Sherry both stood their ground and said, no, this is the film. If we're going to go with it, we're going to go with it as it is. And, you know, bravo to them for doing it.
And that's my dog saying
my
bravo.
Dog's with him, but
my dog is saying bravo to you as well.
My dog's with him, but he echoes that.
So you ended up with an associate producer credit on the film. Right. And I'm curious, because we've had conversations leading up to this evening. How did you earn that associate producer credit? Was it because you had to go to a West Hollywood bar to find two hot men to do the film's making love scene as sex body doubles, because the two leads refused to do that sex scene? Can you tell us more about that situation?
Yeah, I think people are more interested in that than they are. Yes, well, when we shot the scene of Michael and Harry, the kiss for the first time, and then they go into the bedroom and you know, unbutton their shirts and fall into bed and roll around in bed. Arthur Hiller, we shot it and said, I think we need more. I think we need to go a step further. And meaning he wanted them, to take their clothes off and actually, show them not directly, but through shadows, through framing, through composition, through angles, but certainly to give the sense that they were actually, they were having sex. Michael and Harry, God bless them, who really didn't resist anything, who knew what they were in for. They had their limit. They didn't, because it wasn't really written directly like that in the script. They felt that that gave them an out. That they just felt they would go so far. Two straight guys, 1982. They were thinking of their careers and all that, and that they just didn't want to, take their clothes off and roll around naked. So Arthur comes up to me and said, "We're going to shoot the scene in the afternoon. Can you go wherever you think you should go and round up two hot guys?" He didn't say two hot guys, but I knew what he meant. And see if they'd be willing, and we would pay them to be, stand-ins, doubles for Michael and Harry, and be willing to take their clothes off and be in the scene. I said, sure, it's an easy job. Well, so I thought. So I went with the location manager, and we went to a couple of bars. We went to remember the Blue Parrot was on Larrabee in Santa Monica. I don't know what it's called now, but it was called the Blue Parrot at the time. And sure enough, it was early afternoon, and we found two guys who were willing to do it and willing to get paid for it. And that's who we shot. And they were very amenable to doing whatever was required. And that's how that came to be.
And that's how one gets an associate producer credit.
Yeah, right.
Now, ironically, you were, apart from those two gentlemen, you were the only openly gay person on set. Right. And all the gay set designers at that time were booked. So you got like the one straight set designer in the entire industry. So please tell us how that worked out and how the director depended on you to make the set gay.
Yeah, well, yes, I did come out at the time. I felt that was the other thing, that I told Scott, that if I was going to, to be the screenwriter of the film, because no one else, and Scott was still in the closet, and everybody else associated with the film was straight, the actors, the director, the producers. I felt I needed to come out publicly to give the film some legitimacy, some credibility, that I knew the territory, if you will. So once I did that, Arthur asked me if I would, be there every day to be some form of technical advisor, if you will, which was kind of fun because Arthur, who was, this very straight, Jewish, very liberal guy, but family man and all that. And this was, he didn't know that much about the community, and certainly, but certainly was eager to learn all he could. In fact, I would take him to bars. I would even take him to, there was a place at the very end of Melrose at the time, which had an orgy room downstairs. And I took him down and wanted to see what it was like. And I mean, I couldn't get him to leave. I mean, he just stood there, just fascinated. He'd never experienced that before. Anyway, he asked me to be a technical advisor. So, when we shot the scene of Michael picking up a guy in that area behind Book Circus off Santa Monica, the Black South. He wanted to make sure the guys stood the way they stood. He wanted to be as authentic. They all did. I mean, straight enough, they really wanted to be as authentic and realistic as possible, to the point where, I mean, it got a little silly. I mean, Harry would ask me, Barry, am I wearing my watch the right way? I said, yeah, Harry, we all wear our watches the same way. There's no difference between straight or gay. But Arthur, so, he asked me to be, to make sure everything was as authentic and real as possible, including the way, the guys stood in that pickup area behind Book Circus.
And there was also a painting, if I recall.
I'm getting to.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Good. Oh, good.
So, this is the irony that of all the gay set designers in Hollywood, we end up with the one straight set designer for this movie. And he had we were ready to shoot Harry's house for the first time that afternoon. And Arthur, before we shot it, Arthur said to me, Barry, could you go check the set and make sure it looks right, make sure that character would live in that house with it decorated the way it was, make sure Jim got it right. And I said, yeah, sure. So I went over to the set, walk onto the set. It's Harry Hamlin, the Bart character's living room. And I see hanging above the fireplace was a life-size painting of Judy Garland. And I went, oh, no. First of all, we all love Judy Garland, but I don't know any gay man that has a life-size portrait hanging in their living room, maybe the bedroom, maybe the bathroom, but not the living room. Particularly most important point, that character would not have done that. That character that Harry Hamlin played would not have done that. So I went to Arthur. I said, Arthur, we've got to get it. We've got to have something else to hang over the fireplace. He said, well, go down to the art department and find something that you think would be right, which I did. Ended up with that that lithograph of that bicycle, whatever it is. So,
right. So in terms of actors, I've read that the role, Harry Hamlin's role, was offered to Harrison Ford, who said no.
No, that was Michael's part. He's that character.
Oh, Michael's part. So Harrison Ford said no. Richard Gere said no. Michael Douglas said he would think about it, but he was an eventual no because his representation didn't want him to be kissing another man on screen, if I'm correct in understanding that. So how did you end up with the cast that you ended up with? You had Harry Hamlin, Michael Onkin, Kate Jackson, who are all wonderful actors. Can you tell us a bit about how that process
Yes,
unfolded?
the studio, obviously, as any studio would, wanted stars to play these characters. So yeah, Harrison Ford, no. There were even, I think, Dustin Hoffman, no. William Hurt, no. I mean, Michael Douglas was the first one who said, well, maybe, let me think about it. And he kept us kind of dangling for 3 or 4 weeks. Well, at the dangling time, there were rumors that the studio was being sold to Marvin Davis, who was this Colorado oil man, multi-billionaire, whatever, who wanted to buy the studio. And everybody got very nervous. Danny Melnick and Sherry and everyone thought, well, we better move fast, because if we haven't started production yet and Marvin Davis comes in, his whole attitude may be, no way, I'm not making a gay movie. So we needed to move fast. So once Michael finally said no, and finally, Sherry said, Michael, it's yes or no, let's do it. And he said no. We just said, rather than going to stars and waiting while they, hem and haw for 3 weeks, let's just go with the best actors we can. And let's not worry about stars. Let's just get the best actors we can, and the subject will be the star. Michael and Harry were they weren't unknowns. Michael had starred in a couple of TV series, actually one with Kate Jackson, The Rookies. He had done a couple movies. He'd done Slapshot with Paul Newman and a couple others. Harry had done Clash of the Titans and Movie and a couple other films. And they came in, they were terrific and willing to do it, both straight guys who were willing to play gay, which at that time was pretty daring. It was pretty bold because the only times, straight actors played gays were either as comedy relief or butts of jokes or, portraying, very pathetic, miserable, suicidal characters. But so, to present a positive image of a gay man was pretty groundbreaking at the time. So the fact that they were, that they were not established stars, up and coming, and were willing to take on the parts, it was to their credit, certainly. Once we had them, though, the studio did want a name for the female lead, for the Kate Jackson part. And Kate at the time was starring in Charlie's Angels on TV. It was it was a big television show, and she wanted to make the break into movies. Remember, she was going to do the Meryl Streep part in Kramer versus Kramer a couple of years earlier, but she couldn't get out of her Charlie's Angels contract. By the time we came around a couple of years later, I believe the series had just ended, or she had renegotiated her contract, which then allowed her to do it. So she came aboard, and Melnick was very smart. He felt it would be great to get somebody who was a television star to play this part because she was familiar with people, that she had come into their homes every week. Charlie's Angels was a huge hit. That familiar person would be able to kind of guide the audience through what, for most people, certainly straight people, would be a very perhaps uncomfortable, or certainly a new and daring and audacious kind of subject. But if she were there as kind of the anchor, as kind of the point of reference that would take them on this journey, then by the time at the end of the movie came around, where she accepts Michael and she is very much in his corner, then the audience would be too, having gone with her on the journey. And I thought that was a very smart thinking on Melnick's part, certainly.
Speaking of daring, you were telling me a story about that big kiss scene between Harry Hamlin and Michael Ontkean, and how the director decided to shoot a rehearsal after lunch and a few glasses of wine to loosen everybody up. And he secretly shot the rehearsal. Can you tell us how that improved the scene? Did they do more shoots after that? Were they more relaxed?
Yeah, they were, both Michael and Harry knew that scene was coming up right after lunch, and they were a little nervous. It was the big kiss and the undress thing. So, they had a couple glasses of wine at lunch, and we came back from lunch, we were on set, and Arthur said, okay, guys, let's run through the scene. Let's do a rehearsal. And unbeknownst to them, he had the cameras roll. And they shot the rehearsal, which they thought was a rehearsal, but he actually had shot it. And once we finished, he told them, he said, well, guys, it's on film. The kiss is on film for posterity. Can't change it now. Once they knew that they had actually done the scene and it was on film, that kind of broke the ice. That sort of gave them the freedom and ability to then, continue doing it without any hesitation. So I thought, that was very shrewd on Arthur's part to do that, because it did, allow them to break the inhibitions that they might have had.
How many more takes did they do?
Not too many. I mean, maybe 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Before the shoot, you took Harry Hamlin, who, let's face it, was a very sexy star in Clash of the Titans, out to tour West Hollywood bars. And what was that like? And was he cool with it? And how did that help the film?
Harry was great. Harry, by the way, has been a great champion and supporter of the film. And every time we've had an anniversary screening, the 10th, the 20th, 25th, he's always there and is always supporting the film. But he really wanted, again, he wanted to be as authentic and realistic as possible. So he wanted, so, you know, he'd ask me, constantly ask questions about gay lifestyle, about, you know, whatever aspects of behavior and attitude and experience that he would be able to use to create the character and be as real as possible. So he wanted to go to the bars, you know, because that character was a creature of the bars. So I took him to a number of bars. And of course, you know, he'd walk into the bar and guys would just instantly congregate around him. And he would always say, I'm just here doing research, just here doing research. And I would always be there. I said, yeah, he's just here doing research. Don't get excited. But he was very cool about it. I mean, he really, he was just had no hesitation. He just went for it. And Michael didn't, only because Michael felt that character was so closeted and so repressed that he wouldn't have gone to the bars. He didn't want to, he wanted to come from his point of realism, which was, you know, he had really not experienced the gay lifestyle at all. So
Right.
each of them in their own ways wanted to be as real as possible.
A few years before your film came out, a movie called Cruising with Al Pacino was released, and many within the community were not happy. Were you nervous at the time how this film, your film, would be received?
Well, it wasn't that I was nervous, but just to backtrack a bit, growing up, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and anyone who grew up during that period and even later on, and was conflicted, wrestling with their sexuality, in the closet, afraid to come out, you know, this was reinforced. This conflict and confusion and fear really was reinforced by the images in movies and TV. I mean, you know, we certainly get a lot of our self-images and attitudes about life and love and everything else from the movies. And the images of gay men and women that I got from the movies growing up were really ugly. They were really pathetic, miserable, self-loathing, ashamed, or else they were, you know, the butts of jokes or buffoons. I mean, they were just, you know, horrible, ugly visions of gay men and women. I remember when I was, you know, 13 or 14, seeing the film Advise of Consent, our Preminger film, where Don Murray plays a senator, a young senator who's married with kids, but he had a gay relationship when he was in the army some years before, and he was running for office or something, and his political rivals found out about it and were about to expose him as, you know, having had a gay experience, and he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't accept it. So he slit his throat. The year before, you had the Children's Hour, where Shirley MacLaine is running a girls' school with Audrey Hepburn, and gradually comes to realize that she's in love with Audrey Hepburn, and it's not just a platonic love. I mean, she really is in love with her, and she can't accept that. She can't come to terms. She's so ashamed. She's so self-loathing that she ends up hanging herself. So you had these images of gay people who so could not accept themselves and ended up killing themselves as a result. Cruising was just another example of a very ugly, negative look at gay men. It was a little bit more advanced, certainly, in the sense that the it explored the whole S&M subculture in the bar scenes. So it was a little bit more, I wouldn't say advanced, but it was certainly more audacious in that way. But it was still an ugly look at gay people, so that, you know, the straight community only had the images of gay men and women were only images of gay people so ashamed, so self-loathing, so disgusted with who they were, they would kill themselves. Or else you had images of, you know, the swishy buffoon, or you had images of the S&M, the depraved, you know, degenerate. I'm not making a value judgment. I'm showing how they were portrayed on film. Images of like that. That's all the straight community had to go on. That was the images they were fed through movies and TV. So I wasn't nervous. In fact, I was quite the contrary. I was excited by the prospect that we would show a whole other image of gay men. We would show something that we've never seen before, where a gay man could be ultimately come to terms with self-acceptance, that of being honest with himself, that he was a man that you could respect, that had self-respect, that had strength and integrity and compassion. So that image, which we'd never seen before on screen, I felt was a real breakthrough. And I thought, you know, if the straight community saw that image, that in some ways it could counterbalance all the negative imagery that we had been conditioned to see on screen.
Yes, thank you. And shortly after your film came out, other gay positive films came out, like Victor, Victoria, and Personal Best. Were you hoping for more such films to come out of the studio system? Why do you think more didn't? Was it,
no, I think
was
AIDS,
it the AIDS crisis?
I think AIDS came, yeah, right on the heels of this. I mean, Making Love did fairly well commercially. I mean, enough to make back its money, but it was not a blockbuster. I mean, it didn't give the studio reason to continue making them. But I know it opened when Fox opened it in major cities. It did very well because there had been so much promotion, and the gay audience was really eager to see it. So, you know, everybody went that first week. So it did well. When it broke out into more rural areas, let's say, or you know, into areas outside the big cities, you know, it didn't do nearly as well. So right at the same time, shortly thereafter, along came HIV/AIDS, that really, you know, kind of put a freeze on any films. I mean, you know, that what it ushered in was an era where we did see films dealing with AIDS, where you saw Parting Glances and Longtime Companion, films like that, that were really more the purview of the independent arena than the studio system. Studios, Philadelphia, but that was later. That was like 93.
Right.
So,
When you were out promoting Making Love, you, as part of the PR tour, came out publicly on radio stations, on TV stations, and people in Hollywood warned you that this would kill your career. So what was the impact on your career?
well, yeah, I mean, it was once I decided to write the movie and to go full steam ahead, then I knew that it was you know, important for me to come out publicly. Once I made that decision, there was no turning back. So yes, people did say, "Are you crazy?" This was like 1981, 82. Once you're out publicly, you know, that could really hurt you. You know, and I just felt, well, whatever it is, if no one wants to hire me because I'm an out gay man, hey, fuck them. You know, then those aren't people I want to work for or work with. Also, you know, I was at that point starting more toward writing my own original material rather than being a writer for hire. And, you know, I was never going to write you know, a Bruce Willis war movie or an action movie or a Western. So, you know, that was not, whether I was out or not, it's probably not something I would have been hired to do. But it really ended up not hurting my career that much. I mean, I did, right after the following year, I did Crimes of Passion and had no problem. That was an easier film easy film to get set up too. Well, certainly once Ken Russell came aboard, it was. And certainly with Kathleen Turner and Tony Perkins. But, you know, and I continued to work after that. But it was interesting you brought up the tour that Fox sent me on. Yes, to promote the film. Because I was out publicly and very willing to go out on the road with the film, I just felt it was important to be public about it, to go, and they sent me on the Today Show and ABC 2020 and every, you know, Good Morning Detroit and Good Morning Pittsburgh, whatever. I just felt it was important for the audience to see that that a gay man was willing to come forward and not be ashamed of being gay, just, you know, being very, you know, relaxed and very confident about my identity. So I just felt that was necessary to do and important to do. And I had no problem doing it. Again, you know, people warned me that, you know, there could be some crazy lunatic somewhere with a gun. Who knows? I said, well, you know, that's the risk I take. The only time, this is funny, the only time I ever came into any kind of situation or potential situation, I was on a radio talk show in Atlanta. And it was a call-in show. And people were calling in, you know, most of them were pretty civil. And then the host says, okay, we have a call for Barry from whoever. And he gets on and he said, you know, he said, you dirty Jews are all alike. I went, whoa, dirty Jews? Yeah, I'm Jewish, but I never, he says, you're always trying to change the world. So that, I mean, the irony is that's the only, you know, really kind of negative attitude I got was anti-Semitic rather than homophobic.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you look back at that film, Making Love, what is your perspective on it now and its legacy and where it sits in history?
Well, I will say, you know, the most gratifying aspect of it, and I think every writer on here will appreciate this, and that I got an enormous number of letters from gay men and women around the world, actually, mostly in this country, but certainly around the world too, saying that this film had this profound impact on them, that they were able to come to terms with who they were, that they were able to come out to their families, that it just finally gave them a sense of dignity and pride that they had never gotten from a film before. And to me, that's, you know, was the most gratifying thing that a writer could experience is to know that you have moved people to that degree with your writing, with your work. So that was very important and very profound for me to experience that. Yeah, and through the years, you know, the film has been, you know, we've had anniversary screenings with panels afterwards. I know Outfest has done a number of them. And we had one a few years ago, 35th anniversary screening. And, you know, they always are very well attended. And people know the film, and they certainly, and those who don't or experience it for the first time are very moved by it. But, you know, in the context of history, I mean, it is 1982. We've come a long way since then. Certainly, there have been films since then that have dealt with the gay experience that have been very successful. You know, Brokeback Mountain, or like you mentioned, Philadelphia. So that's great to see. You know, I was always asked when I was on panels, what would be the optimum experience of gay images on film? And I said, well, if you can do like a Marvel movie or an action movie where the lead character happens to be gay or lesbian, and they would go out and fight the bad guys or kill the aliens or whatever during the day. They'd come home to their partner or their wife or their husband at night and never mention, not a big deal of it. Don't even mention that they're gay. Just that was their life. That they, were in a same-sex marriage, or didn't even have to be a marriage, just involved with some of the same sex, and just be very, nonchalant about it. And I think we're heading there. I do think we're getting there. I think television has had an enormous amount of influence in that regard, because when you have, shows like Will and Grace and so many other shows that feature gay characters, that even if they're not centralized gay characters, they are certainly involved in the cast, supporting characters. And I think what that has done over the years is just make people beyond aware, just realizing that that we're here and we're part of the fabric of society, and we are your neighbors and your sons and your cousins and your nephews and your colleagues, and that's it. And I think the more people see this on TV, the more it just becomes they become conditioned to know that we're just part of society. And I think a lot of that led to ultimately growing acceptance of same-sex marriage. I think we saw the shift over the years from 20 years ago to what it is now in terms of public acceptance. So I think we all, as writers working in television or film or theater or video games, whatever, have made that impact in terms of presenting gay characters as part of the narrative. And I think it's had a profound influence in accepting us.
Thank you. Do you believe that a studio or a streamer today would make Making Love?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think a streamer might. A studio might be a little reluctant, but I think there's so much hunger for content between Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Apple and all these that there is a hunger for material in general. So I think, yeah, I do think so. I mean, listen, look at the gay oriented films that they are making. I mean, even like a film like Love, Simon, certainly, and that dealt with high school. So I think, yeah, I do think they'd be willing to make it. I don't think they would necessarily compromise it. I do think they'd be willing to make it.
Well, since they're remaking everything, they should be looking at remaking Making Love. I want to thank you so much for this salon. This is the first of a series of salons that the Writers Guild will be doing. And so this is our inaugural salon. Thank you so much.